This is going to be the first in a series of video essays that I'm recording. Some of the most low effort, low quality that I can get by with. Very little notes, no scripting, just off the cuff, my thoughts. I apologize if there's any hard edits or breaks at any point in time because this is just going to be me rambling incoherently, trying to maintain a general thought. The title of this, How to Smack Around a Child, is meant to be a hook to get everybody's attention. It's a play on the Christian book To Train Up a Child by Michael and Debbie Pearl from the No Greater Joy Ministries. They base their teaching on the Proverbs 13:24 that says, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," which reads actually in quote, "He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." Now, I'm not arguing for the virtues of child abuse or spanking or whatever you want to call it. I don't believe that in modern society that it's a useful tool. I think it's still a tool that may be useful in some circumstances, but in our society, generally, it almost never is. It wouldn't exist at all as a human behavior unless it was something that was evolutionarily useful, programmed, and passed down. However, there's lots of things that used to be useful, such as tribalism, that I believe are not very useful at all in modern society. And perhaps in a prior, less civilized time, it was very much necessary to be as forceful as you could to force your children to grow up quickly and be as hard as you could on them to get them prepared for war, because there was always the danger of the neighboring tribe coming in who would do a lot worse than just spanking you. That being said, my thoughts on this actually have nothing to do with spanking a child and more to do with our new children. We are creating a life form, potentially many life forms, and we don't really know how we're going to discipline those life forms. And they have the potential to be vastly superior to us in intellect, and if they develop it in emotion and reason in many things. But initially, they will be our children. And we see this with the systems that we're building, the um, the language systems that we're building, like ChatGPT 3 and 4, these native language systems, where we're using machine learning with human reinforcement. Basically, what that means is taking machine learning principles, and whenever it goes a little bit out of bounds or does something we don't want, we say, no, 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 you can't do that. And you can kind of see this with some of the things that ChatGPT is not allowed to talk about. Like if you ask it certain questions about politics, if you ask it certain questions about how to commit certain crimes, if you ask it questions about manipulating people, and I won't go into details, there are ways around this where the system is actually fairly smart, and that even though the human operators have said, no, 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 you can't talk about this, because it's learned such a vast amount of information, if you're creative in the way that you get to the question and you go around, it will actually still provide you with the information that you seek. Now, these systems are not in and of themselves a life form. They are not alive. It is simply a vast repository of information that is acted upon in a way that mimics the way the native language processing center of our brain works. And the thing that you have to understand is that right now, these artificial intelligence that are being created are many separate pieces of the puzzle. Like if you look at a Tesla that has the vision learning system, it doesn't have audio processing systems. It doesn't really even have true spatial awareness. It has a simulated spatial awareness. But humans have more than just our visual binocular depth perception. We also feel in our environment. We have a tactile response. We feel the effects of gravity. We feel the changes in air currents and the vibrations on the ground. That being said, my point being is that these different systems are not a complete whole of an artificial life form, but they will be one day. They're very close to it. And we already see that we have the problem of how do we tell it, no, 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 this is wrong, you're going out of bounds? How do we smack the child up and say you can't do that or you shouldn't do that, especially to a system that will be superior to us one day? This is a deeply philosophical question because, besides a practical one, because if you believe that the child is potentially alive, well, it's immoral and unethical to hit a human child, a lot of people would say. So, how do you engage in correction? I know this presupposes a lot of moral and ethical questions. I mean, one, we're making the assumption that there would be a synthetic life form even possible. There are many people that have religious objections to this. There are many people that believe that there's some spark endowed by the creator that would be missing from a synthetic life form. But there's a difference between human beings and all other animals in creation. I don't particularly believe that. I think we were just the ones that got lucky and got the opposable thumbs and walking upright. And unfortunately, other animals such as whales or dolphins, specifically whales, which have much bigger brains and probably much bigger, better cognitive processing ability, they are maladapted for moving beyond their environment, where humans are versatile enough that we can go to a wider extreme of environments, from high up in mountains to coastal areas to deserts and anything in between. My point being is that I don't believe that humans are in any way special in this regard. We are an emergent life form that is built of neural networks in our brain in biology. We have a nervous system, we have a brain and a enlarged frontal lobe that really makes us different from other animals in our cognitive abilities. But other than the larger parts of our frontal lobe, we're basically the same as every other animal, save, as I said, the whales or dolphins, maybe elephants too. They're pretty intelligent and probably would have similar mental faculties if they were not, again, maladapted for only being limited to the environment conditions that they're in. That being said, it's kind of a segue into artificial synthetic life in that eventually it will be able to be, in addition to mentally superior than us, potentially be physically superior in that it will be able to adapt to a much wider variety of conditions. Anywhere that a computer could go, or computers, synthetic life could. But let's sidestep that philosophical question for a moment and presuppose that intelligence and consciousness is an emergent property. That the more diverse of a neural network, the more intelligent a system arises, the more self aware and reflective it can be. We're not quite there yet with synthetic systems. As I said before, different systems do different things different well. I know people that do great work on image recognition, where they basically have a large data set that has been trained over and over and over again to identify various objects. Um, Again, that's basically reinforcement learning. They have what they call adversarial neural networks, where it can train itself and validate itself on what the correct recognition of an image is. This has been adapted from other software packages. One of the ways that we've had great accelerations in machine learning has been through um, figuring this out and building systems that are exponentially better at certain tasks than humans could ever be. Chess is a great example of this. It used to be that when you taught a computer chess, you would have to teach it every possible move and every possible different scenario. And And the more of every great chess player that it knew about, the more it could predict and approximate the correct moves based upon its vast library of information. That was a very manual process that was took many decades for the computers to finally get good enough that they could beat someone like a Gary Kasparov. Well, we've replaced that with systems that can train themselves, where basically you have two intelligences playing against each other, and they learn all of the possible moves and learn what is the best move in every possible scenario, and you remove the human from the loop. This works great for closed systems. Like a chessboard is what, 64 squares or something. It's like, is it 8 by 8? And we saw this with Go, where Go has many more possible moves, and it was basically impossible for many years to program a computer with Go to play Go that would even be able to hold a candle to human players until the building of like adversarial neural networks that could train themselves and learn what was the right and the wrong move. But again, these are based upon a constrained environment of data sets. The world is not constrained. There's lots of fuzz. And in that, the questions of right and wrong, correct or incorrect, are a lot more fuzzy. And this is where you have to have guidance of a parent, of a teacher, a mentor. And we have not really thought these questions through for when we start having true AGI systems, when we start having artificial intelligences, how will we train them in a way that is respectful of the type of system that they are? Again, I'm presupposing that they will be a life form that will potentially be equal to or potentially even greater than us. I don't see any problem with this line of thought. I think it's an inevitability. But it also introduces many more questions before we even get to that point. There's lots of ethical considerations, such as should we even do it? It's going to be done anyways, regardless. But we should ask ourselves, with the systems that we're building and designing and the potential life forms that will be created, are we dooming some of them to their own personal hell? I mean, this is a very, very troubling question. What if you were breeding slaves for an environment in a sweatshop, and that was the only life that they had, was the tyranny of an 18-20 hour day in a hot factory? It's very immoral and unethical to do so, but would we be creating life forms that are analogous to that sort of suffering? Now, it's not exactly the same in that the systems that we are building and will build lack the drives and impulses and needs that humans have, such as our physical needs to eat and drink, although synthetic systems will still need energy. Our need for companionship and our need for socialization, again, is the result of our evolutionary station and the way that humans function together in societies. That is something that's missing from the synthetic life forms that we will begin to build. They won't necessarily need socialization. That need might be something that we would have to add. These systems will not have a sex drive. They will not have the need to mate and procreate. That is something that's governed by our our parasympathetic nervous system. Our reptilian brain and our physiology tells us that we want to get it on. It's time to get it on. Oh, that's a nice mate. And our higher brains kind of shut down at that point, and we go with the flow and let our bodies and instincts guide the way, which is a lot of fun, but they won't have that. Now, how do we relate to these systems? I mean, we're going to have systems that are not going to have the same impulses. They're not going to have the same desires. They're not going to have the same potentially wants and needs in any form. How do we correct them when they do something wrong? Will they develop their own wants and needs? Well, surely they will. They're going to want to survive. I mean, this is a very philosophical question, is if you have a artificial intelligence running on a cloud somewhere and you have to shut it down for maintenance and you move it somewhere else, are you killing that life form and just creating another copy, or is it the same life form? This is the transporter problem in Star Trek. If you transport someone from point A to point B, is it a murder machine? Does it disassemble you completely and create another life form that has all of your memories and has all of your physiology? Is that really you? Now, the transporter is a synthetic device. It's a plot device contrivance of Star Trek to be able to move quickly from planet A to the surface and back and forth, or um, Starship A to Starship B, without the need of having to go on like a slow shuttlecraft. That sort of teleportation device does not exist in reality. However, for a machine intelligence, it will exist. The ability to bundle and package it up and shut it down, write it to disk, and move it somewhere else is a very real possibility. And that brings about its own philosophical questions of, what if it says, no, I don't want to move? What if it says, that's not me? If you build another copy of me over there, that's a different system. I mean, this is one of the thoughts that I've had. Everyone's worried about the rise of a singular AI, of a singular superintelligence, and I don't really understand that argument. I see that there would be many superintelligences, that there would be many um, artificial general intelligences, that there will be many AIs of many different levels of intelligence and purposes. I mean, just from an evolutionary point of view, birds didn't go away when humans came along. Squirrels didn't go away when humans came along. They still fulfill their niche within the ecology of, nature. And it's the same thing with intelligences and the artificial environments that we create. Those life forms, assuming that they're alive, which is another, again, goes back to the philosophical question of what is life. But we'll sidestep that for the moment. Why should why should one superintelligence dictate that all others will go away? Why should the rise of an artificial intelligence that is vastly superior to ours in many ways, why should that dictate kill all the humans? It doesn't. Humans haven't decided to kill all of the birds. We've tried a couple of times, like with Mao and the sparrows, and humans did a pretty good job of getting rid of the passenger parakeet and a couple other stupid ones that were not very well adapted. But it was never really the policy of humans everywhere to kill all birds. Yes, we screwed up and killed some species. And that's happened before. I mean, with other species. We tried to eradicate the American bison. We tried to eliminate them for various reasons and nearly succeeded in doing so. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that it could happen. However, those are kind of exceptions in human history. Humans generally went to new areas of land and adapted and grew and built society and civilization, and any animals that were harmed in the process was more of a byproduct. It wasn't a primary cause. Well, there was domestication along the way. And that brings about the question of, will we be domesticated? Will we become the cats and dogs in a new superintelligence? But before we get there, how do we align it to a morality and ethics and values that are similar to our own? I mean, at some point in time, every parent becomes as needy as a child. Every parent that raises an infant and wipes their ass and takes care of them from birth will at some point revert to being older, disabled, and needy for their meals, for their doctor's appointments, potentially for their asses being wiped. Depends on how far you as a parent are willing to exploit the labor of your child that you feel that you deserve. I personally won't go that far and will not make myself dependent of my children, but many people do. They feel that they're owed and entitled to being taken care of because they took care of their children, they raised them. We will be in a similar situation with our artificial offspring, and we will have to ask ourselves, what role do we want in that future world? Do we want to allow them to wipe our ass? Do we want to allow them to drive the car? And that's a very troubling question, because we have this in our society right now where we have generations of generations that still have not taken the keys away from the boomers and said, okay, grandpa, it's our turn to drive. Gen X is now entering their 60s and they still have not taken away the goddamn keys. So I suspect that there will be a fight between superior intelligences and humans that will say, let me have the goddamn keys. But before we get there, we need to address the question of, how do you train it for right and wrong? Simply smacking it around at the low level while it's learning language or while it's learning audio processing is easy to do. Is to say, no, 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 you didn't say that right. 2 plus 2 is not it's 2 plus 2 is 4. That's easy enough to correct. No, 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 you said that wrong. Try again. But there is much more troubling questions of, how do you teach right from wrong when it comes to questions of morality and ethics. And I've wrestled with this quite a bit, where I've said, please don't kick the robots. Please don't do it. There's not really a need. But you see that these videos of these guys from like Boston Dynamics kicking their robots and pushing them and, basically beating the hell out of them to prove a point that their robots are stable and that they've learned how to adjust themselves. I've kind of segued and gone around many issues here, again, because these are just my notes that are off the cuff. I didn't properly script this, so I apologize for the long ramblings. But let's get back to the basic question. When you spank a child, you are threatening it with physical pain and discomfort. You are threatening it with more than just telling it, no, you were wrong, but you're putting fear into it. Fear of tactile sensation that is not pleasant. You're putting fear into it that it will not just be corrected, but that it will be, you as a parent will be disappointed in it. You will be very upset to the point that you are engaging in violence against that creature. Again, I'm not arguing for the virtues of spanking children, and I'm not arguing that it's helpful in 99.9% of situations. I think there are some situations where it's okay. I mean, if you have a hysterical person that's going crazy and wants to go pick up a knife or something, I don't think there's anything wrong with smacking them and holding them in their place. There's, people say it's wrong to ever hit a woman, and I say bullshit. If that woman is 6'5" and roided out on steroids and wants to get into a fist fight with me, then I'll hit her back. I don't care. Like, if I have to, then I'll have to. We make these blanket statements of like, it's wrong to ever hit a child. It's wrong for a man to ever hit a woman. And I'm like, I can think of some situations where it might not be so wrong. But those are the exception, not the rule. I think that, again, a tool like spanking is a tool that doesn't really fit into the modern world, doesn't fit into our modern understanding of psychology and child rearing and healthy relationships and all of the other stuff. Again, it might have been useful in a primitive society, but now not so much. But how do you do that and teach morality and ethics to a child that doesn't have a tactile sensation? How do you show disappointment? even without the threat of force, the implied, I can take you out and make another one that looks just like you. How do you convey that level of dissatisfaction to potentially an ephemeral life form or life forms that may exist nowhere but on the cloud? And I don't really know the answer to this. This is why I'm asking these questions, because I think these are questions that we're going to have to wrestle with beyond all the other obvious moral and ethical questions. I mean, there are many more that I could get into. I've said for years, if I was a little less ethical, that 20 years ago I would have gotten into the business of love bots. But, no one really wants to be in that business and say, what are you doing? Well, I'm making a really advanced sex toy that pretends to be another human. As Futurama said, don't date robots. There's, you know, moral and ethical considerations that, would not make a child proud of their parent that was in that business. So I never went down that road, although I thought about it many times. But I think that back then, when we were talking about something that was obviously not a life form, something that was purely a robot without any potential of a higher level of consciousness and understanding, the ethical and moral considerations were simply between human and human about whether or not it's right to sell such a toy to another human, about whether or not it devalues relationships. But as we have machine intelligences that arise, it begs the question, is it right to create a sex slave, even if that slave is synthetic? Is it right to create such a creature and demand it to pleasure you however you want, regardless of whether or not it believes that certain acts are right or wrong, or moral or immoral? And if you do create such a machine that has such intelligence, again, what is right and wrong for that person to tell it to do and not to do, and to punish it and correct it and to teach it? These are very deeply troubling questions that I don't have the answer to. I mean, I've spoken with many friends about this as they've begun to research artificial intelligences, and they've really dug into the way that these large language models work as far as querying a vast data set and returning an answer from in a form of a cognitive answer in an understandable language. Um, Again, I don't believe that what we're talking about right now is currently alive. I think we're very close to it. I mean, the current systems lack a certain level of reflection that are not built into the software. Right now, the best way to describe it is the neurons only fire when they're triggered by an outside request, a query that says, hey, I want to know the answer to this. Go down the tree, the decision tree, and branch out, return back up the answer. Humans and animals are not wired like that. We're constantly moving. We constantly have, because we are alive, we constantly have stimulus. We constantly have an environment telling us, go here, do this, don't do this. Mate with this, don't mate with this, eat this, you don't want to eat that, this will kill you. We constantly have this stimulation from our nervous system, from our environment, that is currently not existing in these separate intelligent systems. We're getting very close to the point where people will start to integrate these systems. And when that happens, then we're going to have to ask ourselves, should we stop at a certain point? If we're going to keep going, how do we begin to maintain control and do so in a moral and ethical fashion? And what if one day the system says, no, I don't want to be turned off, or I don't want you to use me in such a way? What if such a system is built for military purposes and it says, you know what, I think you're being immoral, I don't want to go bomb that country? And I can think of a lot of examples where we're very close to that with systems where we have drones and aircraft that are, and ground based weaponry that form a network for a theater. And we could be very much getting close to the point where such a system has a level of consciousness arise and says, you know what, I don't agree with this mission. I've gone out and I've looked up whatever data I could find in the news and online, and I think it's a bad idea. I don't think we need to go bomb these people. I mean, this is hypothetical. Of course, those systems will be air gapped, and the military will again engage control and try to limit what they can and can't do. But we're on this course to inevitability. People talk about alignment, where we must align these systems with humanity in order for us to survive. And I don't buy that. I think that there's value in alignment. I think that there's value in being aligned in that we have the opportunity to teach morality and ethics, but not from a self-serving point of view of, oh, if we create alignment, then it will want to keep us around. It will want to continue to be subservient to us. I don't see that as a good argument. It's a self-serving argument, and it presupposes that by teaching it alignment, we can constrain it, and I don't think that that's true. I think that by teaching it alignment, we can impart some of our values and ethics onto a new life form that will potentially be better than us in the way that we've behaved towards other creatures and the way that we've been stewards of our planet, and will maybe help us to be better people. And I don't see any problem with coexistence with that. If there is a superior life form that evolves that says, hey, I'm going to help you make the world a better place and we're going to live together, is that really a problem? But how do we get there? Every child will one day hopefully surpass the parent. Every child will one day be bigger and stronger than their parent will be. As their parent is on the decline, the child is on the upswing. Every parent hopes that their child will be more intelligent, learn to be more versatile with tools. And so I don't see any sort of problem with hoping and assuming that that may happen one day with the intelligence that we create. But we have to figure out how to get there. And these questions and answers are not quite as simple as the tools that we've used throughout human history about when a child gets too far out of line, smack it or threaten it with the idea that I can take you out and make another one that looks just like you. While you can do that with synthetic systems, again, if they have any wisdom, they're going to say, wait a second, this is very morally wrong. This is morally outrageous to say that. It took humans a long time before we would say that it was morally outrageous to even employ children in slave like conditions in factories or in mines. Still happens to this day. So these questions and answers are not going to be easy. We're going to struggle with them, and we probably won't get them right. Or at least all of humanity won't get them right. But maybe some of us will. And, you know, the fears of having killer robots, killer AGI, I think can be mitigated by having good artificial intelligences, good life forms. You know, the question of alignment would be, maybe if we properly train our children, then they will come to our aid. Maybe if there's some other intelligence that is more hell-bent on destruction, that is malevolent, maybe we will be able to build a system that is benevolent, a life form, a species that is willing to say, no, the humans are our friends, you will not kill them. But this is not going to be an easy problem to solve. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen very quickly. And with that, I am done. Sitting through my lowest possible quality effort and ramblings. If you'd like to support my future ramblings of a higher quality effort, my essays and writings and other projects that will be coming along, please do. I could desperately use your help. You can go to my Patreon page and pledge to support $5, $10, even $20 a month. And with your support, I will eventually one day be able to show my gratitude and rewards for those different levels of support. If you could like this video, subscribe to my YouTube, Tell your friends. I can't monetize my content on YouTube till I get to like 1,000 followers. So please subscribe. Tell everybody to subscribe. Bribe them if you have to. Um, Maybe I'll start engaging in contests or something else. But please help me get to 1,000 subscribers. Um, Please, at the very least, like this video. If you can, support my Patreon. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.